Well, the title of my talk, I don't know if it showed up in the bulletin, but it's actually Mayday, 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 the power of change. When Reverend Karen talked to me a month and a half ago about filling in, she said, can you have a title? I went, okay. I gave it the title. I didn't have any substance, but I had the title. And you know, like in ministerial school, they told us there's like 3 talks that you give. There's the talk you're going to give, the talk you give, and then on the way home you go, the talk that you wish you had gave. So, you know, I was looking at the month of May and how it kind of blends into some themes to bring into this talk about the power of change. You know, we started off on the very first day of May with Mayday. And when I was growing up, I went to a Catholic grammar school, and I remember in Mayday it was a big deal. They would have baskets, and the girls would give them to the guys and whatever, and it was a big deal. I think in 8th grade I was in the hospital for mononucleosis, and all the girls wanted to give Bobby Brock all the baskets. And Sister Cassandra says, no, he only gets 1. So you have to give the rest away. So, and I was talking with my friend and mentor, Phil Pearson. He says, oh yeah, we used to celebrate May Day at the village a lot. So, you know, it's kind of a Christian thing, but it has its roots in a pagan, which is, you know, the country religion of a May Day. And it celebrated a Roman goddess Freya of fertility, because May Day, also called Beltane, comes in the exact center of spring. So the people knew for sure that winter and spring was going, and summer and the fruits and the harvest were surely coming. So it's a time for celebration. They would cut down a pine tree and they would dance around it, and that's how they get the term the maypole. And also, you know, being a retired Coast Guard officer, that term Mayday, boy, that has some significance for me. Because the term Mayday, 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 spoken clearly 3 times, is an international voice distress signal. I'm thinking, well, how does Mayday come in? Mayday actually comes from a French word meaning, come help me. Wow, yeah, I know. Thank God for the internet, man. You want to know something? Google it. And you know, things change. We just ended April. And the power of April was love. And now we're into May, which is the power of power. There's change. And you know, we don't want to forget about love. It was mentioned that I do these radio shows of Charles Fillmore's, and one of there's some great quotes that Charles has, and I call it Unvarnished Charles. You know, some of his books are a little difficult to read, if you may know. I see some nodding heads, yes. But this is a talk that he gave. Somebody wrote this down, shorthand, typed it up, and Cora Fillmore kept these things, and then when she died, they ended up in the archives. And in a talk in November of 1933, Charles said this about love. He said, the same life that flows through the universe flows through you. There is only one life in you all, through you all, and above you all. Now Jesus realizes this power of God in his consciousness as love. This love consciousness is something that we all need to understand the teachings of Jesus. So having love in our life is a very important thing. And like I said, you know, we're going through some change. Even in unity. I heard often, we said, you know, unity could also be called change, because, you know, I was at the village there for 6 years and I've seen a lot of changes, and we're going through some changes now in our movement as it is. And I want to talk about a particular type of change called metamorphosis. Metamorphosis, which is a complete change in structure or form. Now, I may be dating myself and some of you, but how many of you have heard the saying, plunk your magic twanger, Froggy? All right. I know, yeah, the Buster Brown shows on Saturday mornings. And Andy Devine would stand by this big grandfather clock, and he would say, plunk your magic twanger, Froggy, and there'd be a poof, a cloud of smoke. And this little frog puppet would come out and go, hiya kids, hiya kids. And it was called Froggy the Gremlin. And Froggy would when Andy would try to be interviewing his guests, Froggy would complete the sentences and get them off into misspeaking. That was before politicians had that word, misspeak. And then, so the kids just loved it. I loved it, And then the more they tried to follow it, the worse it got. So, I think sometimes in our own lives, we can plunk the magic twanger, Froggy, poof. And instead of being a positive thing, some negative thing, some misthinking can come to our mind. And we can take those things that come up in our life, and boy, we're running right down that negative path. This friend of mine told Bob, you are a catastrophizer. Because I can take something and, Margie and I can have a little tip, and I'm out in the street, broken and homeless. I don't know. All it is, and relationships are a lot of conflict too, and personal relationships, organizational relationships, there's going to be conflict because people are people. So I was thinking about the frog. And the frog has a positive thing too. Our Native American brothers and sisters looked at the different animals that would show up in life. And the frog is a symbol for change. Frogs start out with little tadpoles, right, that's swimming in the water, and then they grow some legs, then they come up on the beach, and they become they metamorphosize into a frog. And whenever animals show up in my life, I try to look and say, I wonder what that symbolism is. I got the Ted Andrews book on animal totems, and I'll take a look at it, particularly if something comes up repeatedly. So I'm thinking about the frog and the change or whatever. And frog is also a nice acronym. F-R-O-G. Fully relying on God. Frog. And I just find it so great, the daily word for today is talking about letting go and letting God. So a lot of times, I think, do I fully rely on God? The Apostle Paul, in writing to the Romans, one of his most theological treatises, told them, what then shall we say in response to these things? For if God is with us, who can be against us? If God is with us, who can be against us? Wow. And another thing that happens in the month of May, and it happened last weekend on Sunday. And most mainstream churches, they celebrated the festival of Pentecost. Pentecost. And it comes 50 days, 50 days after Easter, after resurrection. And in the Jewish community, it was also another festival called Exodus, the booths or weeks, where the Jewish community would get together. And for 8 days, they would live in booths, constructed of them, of leaves or whatever, to remind themselves of the change that they went through when they left Egypt in the Exodus. So that story of Pentecost, which shows up in our Christian New Testament in the 2nd chapter of Acts. Remember, the apostles and Jesus were all Jews. And for 50 days, the apostles were hiding out. They were scared. Their leader had just been crucified. And that was a punishment that was reserved for traitors against the government, to the Roman government. They hung you up there to give an example. And anybody connected with them could be having the same fate. And the Romans that occupied the territory of Palestine were very judicious in using that. They put everybody up there. So they were fearful. They're hiding up in Jerusalem in an upper room of the facility. And the way the story of Pentecost goes, that they're all gathered together, all 11 and Peter. They had a replacement for Judas. And suddenly a rushing of a wind-like sound happened. And then tongues of like fire appeared on all of them. And then they began to speak in different tongues and languages. And an image of Jesus appeared to them, breathed on them, and says, receive the Holy Spirit. And things happened. They went out into the streets and they started preaching. Peter, the one who denied Jesus 3 times, says, I'll never deny you. And 3 times he denies before the rooster crows twice. He goes out there and starts preaching. 3,000 people are brought into it was called the Way then, it wasn't called Christianity. And some people were saying, because everybody was there, because during this festival, all the Jews had to travel to Jerusalem. So there's people from all over the area, from the diaspora, they called it. And they were hearing in their own language what the disciples were talking about. That's the idea of tongues. They all got the message. And, of course, there's a few skeptics, and they say, these guys must be full of sweet wine. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning. And I know I had some friends that say, it's got to be noon somewhere. But anyway, this is the complete change. And when I look at that story of Pentecost, metaphysically, which is the way we like to look at these stories in unity, when I'm in my heart center and I might be hiding out and I go up into that upper consciousness with all of my 12 powers, that Christ's Spirit really comes to me and kind of breathes new life into me. And I'm able to go forth and do things. There is a metamorphosis in Bob. Charles Fillmore, in speaking on Pentecost in one of his works, said, the Revealing Word, talks about Pentecost. It says, this attitude of many minds forms a mental magnet and brings about results in flashes of light and spiritual illumination. This attitude of many minds forms a mental magnet and brings about results in flashes of light and spiritual illumination. Wow. Coming up into your upper conscious, coming together as a spiritual community. You are mental magnets. Right? You were doing that affirmation about prosperity and that's a mental magnet. Guess what it does? It draws things to you. Every night, Margie and I, we have it's called bedtime rituals. We tell each other 5 things we did right. Because we can sit back and say, oh man, I wish I had done this right. But we tell each other what we did right. And also, Margie has printed up some affirmations from Catherine Ponder's books. And I think we have like 4 different sheets. And each night we will take turns reading to each other. And these are prosperity demonstrations. It helps bring that into our lives. And the one thing that came out of that Pentecost experience that I see is the Apostle Peter. He goes from denying Jesus of Nazareth to being one of the leaders of the spiritual community there. So he goes from hiding to a really faith-filled disciple. In our 12 powers concept, Charles Fillmore identifies Peter with the faith, the power of faith. And interestingly, back in 1920s, when Charles was developing this concept of the 12 powers, he identifies a part in our body where the 12 powers reside. And back then he chooses the pineal gland, which is in the center of our brain between the 2 hemispheres. It's the little pine-shaped cone that actually secretes melatonin and has to do with our level of awakeness. And back in the 1920s, they had no idea what the pineal gland did. They knew it was there, but Charles said, fix this. So having, going forth in faith, we have to make some changes. Myrtle Fillmore, our other co-founder of Unity, was an avid letter answerer. People would write to Myrtle and say, Myrtle, how do we do about this thing? Or what do we do? And some of her material shows up in the book, The Healing Letters of Myrtle Fillmore. And also on the Unity website, which you can get through my show, there's a direct link. There is an unpublished collection of Myrtle Fillmore material too. And it was through Margie's ministerial class in 2006. They took up a collection and they had enough money, gave money to the library to put this collection on the internet. So you can sit here in Auburn, California, and get on the web, see some of the unpublished stuff from Myrtle. You can see it in your book, of course. But the other unpublished stuff that Myrtle had written. And people from all over the country would write to Myrtle for advice, and Myrtle would answer them. And one of the answers that shows up in Myrtle Fillmore's Healing Letters, Myrtle wrote this. It says, so long as we remember experiences that were unhappy, as we saw them once and still see them and speak of them, we will be unable to demonstrate joy and prosperity and health in our lives. As long as we hold on to those old thoughts, new stuff cannot come in. Now, I grew up on the west side of Chicago. And one of the scary things growing up was vehicle breakdowns. I mean, I've seen it on the news every night. Vehicles would break down in some bad neighborhood and people got robbed or mugged or hurt or killed. And I knew when vehicles break down, it was scary. I was about 7 or 8 years old. We're riding in my dad used to get these clunker cars. And we had a 1949 DeSoto, and it broke down. Somebody else broke down and pulled over the side road. And my sister and I are in the back and go, oh my God, we're going to die. My mom and dad say, no, you're not going to die, you know. But that's where my consciousness was. So throughout the years, whenever I had vehicle breakdowns, it was like, oh my God. And I remember my very first church at Unity of Modesto, Reverend Larry Schelling talks about, we live and move and have our being in God. And he used the term living and moving and traveling in Goddom. Goddom. So as a Unity 2 student, I started accepting that, you know. Wherever I was going, I'm traveling in Goddom. You know, at the time I was a public defender investigator in Stanislaus County. And I was going through some areas of Modesto that I normally would not go through, but I knew that God was there just as well. He was in the county lockup, in the safety center, they call it, the jail. God's there. So, I had been through ministerial school. Margie was working at the association. I was teaching yoga at the association. In fact, I teach in yoga now in Sacramento at the Sacramento Yoga Center. And I was working towards my certification as a yoga teacher. So I decided I was going to take this class that was up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I had my little portable chapel, my 1995 Geo Metro, which is still in the parking lot. And I was driving up there, and I knew God had a message for Bob, you know. So I'm moving on along, go up, and I'm entering into Iowa. About halfway through Iowa, pulls over the side of the road. Turn to, nothing's happening. My little Geo Metro is not starting. That's okay. I live and move in Goddam. I have my cell phone. I have 100-mile towing with AAA. But still, those old thoughts were dangling. Oh my God, you're out here in the middle of nowhere. So I called AAA, and they said, no, yeah, we'll have a truck there shortly. And in the meantime, all these trucks and cars are zipping by at 70 to 80 miles an hour. I can feel the wind buffeting you. And I was going to meet my buddy who was, we were stationed together in the Coast Guard. He lived up in Minneapolis. And we were going to connect. I was going to go to this training. We're going to have some time together. So I figured I better call my buddy Larry and tell him that I'm by the side of the road somewhere in Iowa. So I called Larry and I said, hey Larry, don't worry about it. You know, the tow truck's coming. I'll get to the nearest town. I'll rent a car. I'll be up there just a couple hours later, but I'll be there. And he goes, do you remember the last exit you said? Passed? I went, yeah, I think it was Dow's, Iowa. He says, Bob, you're in the middle of nowhere. He says, that used to be my sales territory. He says, you're not going to get any rental car down there. He says, you're lucky to get a mechanic to fix it. He says, look, you're only about 2 hours south of me. I'll come down and get you. And he says, on the exit, there's a Shell station. Just have the mechanic drop you there, and I'll come get you. So sure enough, the little yellow AAA Savior shows up, hooks up my little Geo Metro, and I think, well, I'll get on the freeway for a while and turn around. No. This was Zachary Taylor, the mechanic from Dow's, Iowa. We get on the freeway. He goes down into the Meridian, up on the other side and back. I went, oh my God. I'm bouncing in the truck. My little car is bouncing behind. So he takes me to Dow's, Iowa. 1 block long, 1 railroad siding with a grain elevator. And Zach's got his shop. Now, Zach was the fix-it guy in Dow's, Iowa. He fixed cars and trucks, combines, tractors, and anything else. You know, I think a friend of mine would say, he can fix anything except broken hearts and a break a day. So anyhow, Zach looks at my thing and says, oh, I said, there's a repair manual that I got in the trunk. He says, well, yeah, that may help. He says, well, give me a call during the weekend. I'll let you know. I'll probably have it for you on Monday. So he drove me to the Shell station. My buddy showed up. And so I had to release those ideas that something bad's going to happen to me. Great stuff happened. My buddy Larry came with. I went up and we got checked into my hotel. We had dinner together. And we had dinner for the next couple nights. And then on Sunday, when my training was over for my yoga, I stayed overnight with my buddy Larry. Got up the next morning, had breakfast, and drove down to Dow's, Iowa. And sure enough, Zach had fixed it. And he said, well, good thing you left that book. I was trying to figure out the timing on this thing, But anyway, he fixed it. And then I thought, the other negative thought, I'm in the middle of nowhere. He's got me way over a barrel. Is it going to be hand him my Visa card and say, cut here? No, it was much less than what I had ever anticipated. She's now still running things. So, the key point is I had to change my view of vehicle breakdowns. And my little Geo Metro has given me several of those over the past few years. When you hold on to old cars, they kind of give you these opportunities to say, all right, Spirit, how are we going to do this? I see somebody else might have old cars too, right? Yeah, I just smogged them this past week, and that was a whole other story. But anyway, I'm done. So, I need to take a breath and get back into it and allow Spirit to work in and through my life. I had to, do my frog, fully relying on God. So, as I close this talk, let's think about one other thing. How do we do this fully relying on God? Any of you remember the old RCA trademark with the dog sitting by the Victrola, listening to his master's voice? Boy, that's got some nice symbolism too. Well, RCA can mean some things. Reflect, contact, and allow. RCA, reflect, contact, allow. We can reflect, we can go into what we call in unity, the silence. Get quiet. You can sit for more than about half a minute or so like we did today, but get quiet. Get the monkey mind, like the Buddhists call it, quiet. Think about our breath, think about something else, and allow us to be fully present. Just like in Pentecost, the Jews had to pull back from their life. They had to move out of their homes, live in these little booths or tents to reflect and remember what they went through. So you can do that too. Reflect where you were and where you are now in unity and how it's helped you. And then contact. Bring those 12 powers in our life into thought. Now, in Pentecost, they were together for 8 days out in these booths. So imagine if you have 8 of your close relatives living in your house for 8 days. For a good collection. Yeah, guess what happens, right? When Margie and I were graduating from school, we had our family living in our home in Missouri. After a few days, you're going, okay, what's going on? So, you're going to be bumping up against one another. And that's going to happen when you bring those 12 powers in. All right, but out of chaos, good stuff comes. So we get to connect. And then lastly, hey, allow. It's one thing to say, all right, let go and let God. And then allow it to happen. Usually what happens to me, I go, hey, God got it. Oh, second thought, me. Okay, now you got it. Pulling it back, allow God to work in our lives. And I truly believe that God has a wonderful plan for our lives if we would only let it unfold. And a good friend of mine had written a poem several years ago. She was a Unity minister. She was our neighbor in Lee Summit for about 6 years. And she had written this poem. It's called God's Plan. Oh God, I've seen the power and intent of a fern's green fist in a crack of cement. How then could I ever doubt your plan of good for me working out? For enwrapped in me, your purpose and power are ordered and destined to flourish and flower. How then could I ever doubt? Dorothy Pearson.